Hi everyone, James Nikitine here, interdisciplinary marine scientist and founding director of Blue Cradle based in Aotearoa, New Zealand. I'm launching this new series called the Blue Cradle Dialogues, in which I will interview leading scientists, policymakers, marine conservationists who are working tirelessly to protect the ocean and restore the ocean's health. In this new format of dialogues, what we're having is a raw discussion and going through some of the key topics around ocean conservation and science. So I hope you enjoy. Every week there'll be a new guest, and starting this week is Paul Watson, Sea Shepherd Conservation Society founder. So I hope you enjoy it and tune in for the next episode in a few weeks' time. And today I'm joined by Captain Paul Watson, founder of the Sea Shepherd Conservation Society, over 50 years of working to protect the oceans. My first question to you is, how can you keep going, given how it's been aggravating throughout the years? What keeps you going?
Well, I believe you need to focus on the present. So I don't really worry about the future. What we do in the present will define what the future will be. So, you can't control that. You can only control what you do today. So it doesn't matter how overwhelming the odds are against you. It doesn't matter what people say. You just focus on what you're doing in the present.
Would you say that over time, your experience, your age, your wisdom has grown, and that you see things differently, perhaps now than when you were early on the whaling ships, fighting whaling ships back in your 20s? Do you see a difference in behavior and understanding and your philosophy of the world?
Well, the problems that I saw in the 70s are the problems that we're still fighting today. Diminishment of life and diversity in the ocean. And we've made a lot of progress. When it began in 1974, I would say that between 74 and now, 95% of commercial whaling operations have been shut down. When we began, we were dealing with Australia as a whaling nation, Chile, Spain, South Africa, Korea. All those countries have now abandoned whaling. And as of 2 years ago, all pelagic whaling out in international waters has ceased to be. That's the first time that's happened in the history of a commercial whaling. So we've made a lot of progress there. Now we're focusing our attention on stopping overfishing, illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing operations. And we're making great progress there. Just last week, we seized 6 poaching vessels off West Africa and 65 over the last year and a half.
That's really impressive. And so that's the history and the philosophy of the Sea Shepherd Conservation Society, is really this direct intervention. Do you still think 50 years on that direct intervention is the best solution to fix the ocean's problems, confronting the poachers, intervening out on the ocean, enforcing? Or do you think also going through the legal routes is efficient and effective and necessary?
Well, the strength of any ecosystem is in diversity. Therefore, the strength of any movement has to be in diversity. So it doesn't really matter whether that approach is education, litigation, legislation, or direct intervention. It's all working towards the same end. We happen to focus on direct intervention. When I set Sea Shepherd up in 1977, I set it up to intervene against illegal activities. So we're an anti-poaching organization. But I also set it up with a specific strategy, which I call aggressive nonviolence. And after 42 years, we've not killed or injured anyone, but we've shut down hundreds of illegal operations. And so I think that strategy of aggressive nonviolence has proven to be quite effective.
Do you think it would have been just as effective if Sea Shepherd was non-independent, if it was a regulatory body or a government or a world government? Do you feel that would be just as efficient and as being independent as you have been?
No, I think we're quite unique in what we do. And right now, since 2015, we've evolved in a different direction. So now we're lending our resources and our volunteers to governments around the world. So we're working in partnership with over a dozen African nations, with Latin American nations, with Mexico, Peru, and Colombia, Panama. And what that means is that we provide the resources, they provide the authority and the enforcement, which is making our job a lot easier. beyond the 200-mile territorial limits, so we operate under the guidance of the United Nations World Charter for Nature, which allows for non-government organizations and individuals to intervene to uphold international conservation law. So we've actually set in motion a way of doing things which is attracting a lot of attention, not just from governments, but they even teach classes on what we do in the United States Naval War College. And because we've demonstrated that non-government organizations can be effective, and we can be effective on a very small budget.
Yeah, I mean, part of the work that I do is to look at different ways of doing science. Science is usually with the big institutions, the government institutions. And so there's a lot of movements around the world that are pushing for citizen science and more citizen science, because ultimately it's about making it accessible, because a lot of these roles and positions on ships particularly are quite sought after. And so the same would apply, I think, to what you're doing. And so just jumping off topic a little bit, but the topic of conservation has sort of evolved since the 1960s and 70s, Earth Day, and the emergence of parks and marine parks, and the spatial planning of exclusive economic zones, the emergence of the Law of the Sea Convention in 1982. I mean, all this has pointed towards the need to create areas of the ocean that are fully protected, that wildlife can thrive, ecosystems can thrive. Right now, we're at a point in time where governments around the world are pledging to protect the ocean more. What's your views on that? Where do we go from here? What's the best recipe for success?
Well, marine parks, marine reserves, sanctuaries are all well and good, but they're useless if you don't have enforcement. And so that's a real problem. There seems to be an overall lack of economic and political will to uphold international conservation law. Unfortunately, sanctuaries, marine reserves, that's where the poachers go these days, because they know they can get away. That's where the fish are. That's where and they're not going to be interfered with. So we've been working to try and get various governments to really step up, and as far as their enforcement, and so that they can understand that they can make a difference. Like recently in one of the African nations we were working with, we found out that we arrest a poacher and he gets fined $10,000. Well, that's just a day's profit. So we were able to convince the government to raise that fine to $1.5 million, and that's made a considerable difference.
And so, yeah, then the question of poaching, like, it depends on how exclusive economic zones are managed, I suppose. And you look at, for example, Palau, 80% is protected, 20% is loaned out, as opposed to fishing vessels. Then you look at other areas which are completely designated as a marine managed area, like, I'm thinking of French Polynesia and the Cook Islands. But then on the outside of those areas, you have the high seas. So a lot of the time, that's when the fishing vessels aggregate. So how do you and also the topic of FADs, how do you avoid them using these fishing aggregation devices and just to sit and wait on the outside? How do we fight that? That's really just very hard, isn't it?
Well, we confiscate a lot of those FADs all the time. In fact, we've confiscated hundreds of them in the Mediterranean over the last year. We have two vessels in the Mediterranean. As of 2 days ago, we added our second vessel, the Sea Eagle, and to our other vessel, the Conrad, and their job is to pull up marine debris, FADs, and look for poachers in the Mediterranean. But the problem is, again, is that, you have on paper, you have a lot of protection where Kiribati, Palau, and everything else, and it all looks really good. But unfortunately, there is corruption, and there's a lot of illegal activity that continues to happen within these areas. And I think one of our jobs is to try and make a lot of these governments honest by exposing that corruption.
So in your view, like, marine protected areas are an interesting angle, but they're not effective because they're not fully protected and enforced. And that is really it comes down to that. So in the what about targets? Like the CBD has some targets. We've been following those targets: 10% by 2020, 30% by 2030. What do you think of that?
Well, there's a lot of, I kind of dismiss the talk. There's a lot of talk, at all these international conferences and everything, and they set targets and they set goals, but they're very rarely ever realized. I don't think that any of the goals that were set in 1992 at the Rio de Janeiro conference on the environment, none of those have ever materialized. These international conferences, whether they be on the climate or whether they be on population or whatever, they just seem to be get-togethers for politicians to have photo opportunities and make a lot of promises. The COP21 conference in Paris in 2015, which I attended, I mean, the darling of that conference was Justin Trudeau, the Prime Minister of Canada, and he was going to do this, he was going to do that. He goes back to Canada and he supports the tar sands, the pipelines, and the tankers. They talk good, but when it comes to action, they don't do a lot. And it's really not their fault in a way, because unfortunately, politics is the art of the possible. And any politician who has the courage to actually do something usually finds they're thrown out of government, because that means they're not going to be very popular. So I don't think that what I mean by that is I don't think that the results are going to come from politicians. They have to come from the passion, the courage, and the imagination of individuals, and the politicians will follow.
Yeah, I think that's my interpretation of it as well. Is that we need the like everyone across society working towards the same goal. And I think the targets, like I find useful because they sort of give us a goal to reach for, but ultimately the accounting of that target is really where it's tricky at the moment, because governments account for their own protection percentage, and then they report back to the CBD, and that's really just blurred the boundaries a little bit. So we'll just jump to the next question, which is a little bit about the film in which you appeared last month, which is really popular on Netflix, but also has been very controversial because a lot of marine conservationists and fishery scientists have been arguing that it doesn't reflect the situation very well, and also makes some nonprofits look bad. And you just said that nonprofits need to lead the way. So I'm just curious about what you think about the way in which Seaspiracy often depicts these nonprofits that are trying to make the world a better place. So I'm thinking of Oceana and MSC and some of those others working on plastics. Do you feel that we shouldn't be working together, that nonprofits have different objectives in the ocean conservation space?
Well, of course, they have different objectives, and some, some of them have to operate what I call the big tent. That means that they have to satisfy a lot of people, and that means a lot of compromises. And so, unfortunately, the big organizations tend to be subject to that kind of approach. I think Seaspiracy is an excellent film because, especially because it's provoking controversy and people are talking about it. And the medium, Netflix, has reached millions of people on that. Now, some of the criticisms, it's not factually correct or scientifically correct. It's open to debate. I mean, you can find scientists who will argue both sides of an opinion. Just look at climate change, for example. When they say, well, the objective of the fisheries collapsing by 2048 isn't backed up by science. It was originally based on Boris Worm and Daniel Pauly's work and everything like that. And yes, they might have updated that and everything, but does it really make any difference whether it goes down by 88% or 100% by 2048, or if it's going to collapse at 2048 or 2070? It doesn't really matter. The main thing is it's collapsing, it's diminishing and everything. And when some people have criticized me and the film and said, I produced films that were 100% more scientifically accurate and everything, and nobody listened to those. So how come they're listening to that? Well, here's the thing. Filmmaking is about telling a story. If you're going to do a dissertation for your PhD, that's all well and good, but nobody's going to watch it. So Seaspiracy is Ellie and Lucy Tabrizi's story. It's like Rob Stewart's story, Sharkwater, or Gorillas in the Mist for Diane Fossey, or Sylvia Earle's Mission Blue. These are stories, and people can relate to stories, and that's why it's such an effective media, and that's why it's getting so much attention. So they can nitpick over the facts and the stats and everything else like that, but the bottom line is that the film is telling a truth. The oceans are in trouble. Biodiversity in the sea is being diminished, and that is what the film's all about.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with all the positive aspects of the film. I think the film has certainly stirred the debate. I think that's positive. People are talking about it, and that's I'm happy with that. But it's true that some of the choices. I mean, I'm a filmmaker too, and some of the creative choices were not the ones that I would have made, for example. But that's another story. But I suppose the success of it is it shows, and I've been reached out by people who are asking me this, asking me that, and I think you know people need to get a full picture of the problem, and I think um, actually it would have been more suited to a series, and I'm hoping Netflix will listen to this, because a series. I mean, you used to do series, Paul. You used to do Whale Wars. I remember back in the day I used to watch it. So that could be something to keep at the back of our minds, food for thought. I'll just go to collaboration a little bit more, in the sense that nonprofits have different objectives. We've covered that, and they also have different compromises to make. Have you ever been in a situation with Sea Shepherd that you worked with another nonprofit towards the same goal, or perhaps you had conflicted interests but you still worked together?
We tend to work more closely with governments than with other nonprofits. But just going back to the film for a minute, the story is such a big story. I mean, it's the ocean really, and there's only so much you can put into a 90-minute film. So you're absolutely correct. We do need a series, but we also need a lot of shows. We have David Attenborough's films. We have Sylvia Earle's films. We have so many films. Louis Soyos and Racing Extinction and The Cove and all these things. It's the body of work on this is pretty massive, really. And the thing is to get it to as many people as possible. You can make a documentary that for the people who are really the converted who are going to watch it. But the important thing is to get it onto a medium which is going to reach people. And that's why Seaspiracy is so successful, because it's on Netflix. Any other way, it might not have been that successful. But you have to really appeal to that mass medium, really, in order to get your message across. As Marshall McLuhan said many years ago, the medium is more important than the message it conveys. So we have to understand that.
Yeah, I mean the I don't know if you watched the Oscars a couple of nights ago, but My Octopus Teacher won the best documentary film, and for me anyway, that's a personal opinion. I feel that My Octopus Teacher is more perhaps more inspiring than Seaspiracy, in the sense that it's depicting a relationship between a creature and a human being, and how that unfolds, and there's a lot of emotion, and Seaspiracy is quite it's a journey, it's an investigative journey, and it's quite negative because they discover all these bad things, and so perhaps having both is quite important, but certainly it was a beautiful film. They did a great job, but I
Also,
think
again,
yeah.
My Octopus Teacher is a story. It's one man's story and an octopus story, and people related to it, and deservingly, it got the Academy Award for Best Documentary.
Yeah, and I think looking at the audience, I think it's still it's debatable, but Netflix, I think, is 200 million subscribers or something like that, mostly Western, mostly Northern America and Western Europe. I still think there is a lot of work to be done to make those topics find a universal audience for them, and I think that's our tricky task ahead of us, is to really talk to the rest of the world that don't have a Netflix subscription.
I was actually quite excited that that Seaspiracy trended #1 in Hong Kong. So reaching people in China was very important.
Yeah, I mean, Hong Kong, as you know, is not China, and they have a very strong, actually, animosity against China. So they're quite,
But it is on the doorstep, and it is the shark fin capital of the world.
Yeah, I've been there a couple of times. I mean, no, for sure, it's been great to see the success, and certainly everyone's talking about it and writing about it, and I think it's positive ultimately that we talk about these topics, because we need every brain to think about some of the solutions that are out there to solve them. We'll go to some of that now, a little bit about the future and what's coming next. So high seas governance, law of the sea, excuse me. What are your thoughts on the 60% of the ocean? And there's a big framework that's going to be coming up from the UN that will add on to the 1982 Convention on the Law of the Sea, and that will supposedly enable governments, regional fisheries management organizations to come together, designate an area of the high seas for protection. What's your thought on that?
Most important thing that needs to be done, and whether it will be done or not, I don't know, but if we're going to protect diversity and life in the sea, we have to shut down industrialized commercial fishing operations. We have to close it all down. These super trawlers, these longliners, these bottom draggers, these 100-mile long long lines, 100-mile long gill nets, we have to close this down. This is what's destroying our ocean. You know, the fishing industry would like everybody to think that when you go in and buy a fish meal in the restaurant or in the thing, it's coming from a bunch of hardworking men out on these little boats out there catching the fish and bringing it home to market. And that is so far from the truth. These are gigantic corporate operations. And, you know, when you talk about fishermen being put out of work, it's these corporations that are putting them out of work. The artisanal fishing, the indigenous fishing communities around the world, they're being destroyed by these large industrialized operations. That's what we're finding with our work in Africa. You know, the artisanal fishermen in the West Africa and in East Africa also, where we're working, are very, very supportive of what we've been doing in driving those industrialized trawlers out of their waters. You know, you hear about the pirates in Somalia. They're not pirates; they're impoverished fishermen who are driven into poverty by the real pirates, the Asian and the European fishing fleets, which plundered their waters. And that's now happening in West Africa, and we're seeing piracy emerging in the Gulf of Guinea. And so that's why I think our work there in the Gulf of Guinea has been very effective and very important.
So you're talking inside exclusive economic zones or outside on the high seas, on the edges of those exclusive economic zones?
Well, the artisanal fishing communities are on the coast, and that's the areas that we're intervening against the commercial fishing operations. But we are looking outside. One of our vessels, the Ocean Warrior, is working out of Peru to go after the Chinese fishing fleet. That's huge Chinese fishing fleet, about 400 vessels in the Eastern Tropical Pacific. We've already been amongst them. We've already documented some of their illegal activities. And the problem is that you have the territorial waters of Ecuador, Colombia, and Peru, but there's an area where inside that area where the territorial waters don't overlap, and that's the place where the Chinese fleet is concentrating. And they're concentrating so close; they're just about a mile outside of the 60-mile park limit for the Galapagos National Park. And so they sneak in, they sneak out. And so it's very important that we address that, and address it even more aggressively than they're doing now. But we're really trying to get more and more support from the governments that are close to the area and involved.
So because you're so like you're on the like in the fields, and there's now all these technologies that are emerging, satellites observation. I know like Global Fishing Watch is doing some groundbreaking work. There's a framework that's going to come in place, which will be the legal framework under which these fishing vessels, these IUU, won't be able to continue what they're doing. Do you see Sea Shepherd being a part of the puzzle there in the future of ocean governance and enforcement? Do you think you could contribute?
Well, I think so already. There's a class at the United States Naval War College on Sea Shepherd, and what we do is setting an example as to what non-government organizations can accomplish with a very limited budget. And we're sort of a model for what can be done in other areas. And so I think we've made an impact in that way. But also, Sea Shepherd's bigger than that, really, not just anti-poaching, but also with the collection of marine debris, the removal of plastic debris from remote islands like Cocos Keeling Island in the Indian Ocean, or Cocos Island off of Costa Rica. We've cleaned up beaches in northern territories of Australia where people can't even get to. In addition to that, we have Sea Shepherd Legal, which is taking legal action against a lot of these things. In fact, in New Zealand, we actually have a lawsuit against the New Zealand fisheries over the protection of the Maui dolphin, the Hector dolphin. And so our approach is multifaceted in that way: anti-poaching, marine debris cleanup, legal approaches, and but we're just one small organization. The real strength of a movement is in literally thousands of organizations doing thousands of different things and we're using thousands of different strategies. That's what makes an effective movement. And I think we're seeing more and more of that happening all the time. And within that diversity, we have filmmakers and we have scientists and we have lawyers and we have teachers. And yes, I think I see a growing movement of a powerful movement, and it's having an impact.
Do you think there's a future in which Sea Shepherd could be uh, government funded, working globally to sort of act as an enforcement agency 2.0, or do you think it's fundamentally important to remain a nonprofit, like a voice of the community, a bottom up? Or do you think that's ultimately possible that in the future you'll be absorbed by a world government or ocean governance entity that would enforce the oceans?
I think we'll remain independent. If governments have the financing if they're in the position to finance what we're doing, they could do it themselves, really. And we can certainly encourage that. But Sea Shepherd is not going to be under the control of any government or corporation. We are independent in that way. And in a way, we're like the untouchables. We can't be bribed and there's no compromising, and we're not going to be influenced. And if the situation gets such where our operations are unwelcome because we're exposing corruption and everything, then we're not going to back down. We'd rather be kicked out of the area than to compromise with corruption.
Yeah, because you're a nonprofit, so you could potentially provide services as a nonprofit organization to those governments, and that's what you're doing, or you have a company as well, and how does that work?
No,
Are
that's not
you?
what we're doing. We're
Yeah.
nonprofit. What started as a nonprofit organization 42 years ago now, however, is a global movement. Sea Shepherd is not an organization, it's a movement. We're in about 42 different countries. They're all separately registered national entities, all working together under the umbrella of Sea Shepherd Global, which is based in Amsterdam. So it's Sea Shepherd Global that actually manages and operates the ships, and they're supported that. But all of those separate entities also do things in their own areas, whether do marine debris or cleaning or anti-poaching operations in their own waters or in those areas. So it's the great thing about a movement is that as the founder of this thing, I have no idea what we're all doing there. There's so many different things happening, so many different leaders and everything like this. I get daily reports and everything, but this is not under any one person's control. And because of that, I think it can accomplish a lot more because it has all of those different arms that are out there doing so many different things.
So it's almost like a franchise model. People can do what they want with the brand and the energy that they put in, and they reap back the benefits.
Well, they can't do whatever they want. I mean, we do have certain principles.
Right.
We're not, for instance, it's aggressive nonviolence. You can't hurt anybody, and we're certainly proud of that record. And we don't compromise with, we're not going to sell out. So those are the basic rules within that movement. But it's open to a lot of imagination and a lot of initiative.
Great. No, it's great to hear. And yeah, I suppose one of the advantages of that is geography. You're able to cover large areas of the planet that are quite far and distant. And I'm thinking right now of the Antarctic, the Southern Ocean. You've been there on many campaigns. Later this year, there will be a CAMLR. CAMLR is the convention based in Tasmania that works on protecting Antarctic living marine resources. And so there's a big meeting in October coming up to designate 3 new marine protected areas. Hopefully that'll go ahead on the peninsula, in the Weddell Sea, and on the eastern shelf. What do you think of the Southern Ocean? Do you think that's the key to solving the ocean conservation conundrum? Do you think the Southern Ocean is the most important area that we should protect, preserve at all costs?
Well, I think it's important, but there's no point in having sanctuaries or protected areas unless you have enforcement. So I'm certainly hoping that they will be. But my experience in the past is when we found toothfish poachers in the Southern Ocean, reported them to New Zealand or Australia, we were met with apathy, really. The governments weren't interested in doing too much about it. Hopefully that'll change, but I never found a lot of initiative from either New Zealand or Australia when it comes to protecting those waters. They get very territorial sometimes, but I thought if they spent as much time harassing the poachers as they did harassing us when we were down there, I think we'd actually see some success.
Do you think governments' attitudes have changed towards Sea Shepherd over the years? The successive governments, the sort of the modernization of thought,
Yes.
of like digitalization and the awareness of, like, maybe back in the day they thought of you as protesting, bunch of hippies on a boat, but now it's like different. They maybe see the value in having an enforcement partner. Um, do you see that now?
Well, we're working with dozens and dozens of governments right now, and in fact, we're working with the United States government also, with and with John Kerry's, with he's a climate change leader right now. We're working with him, and with the United States Naval College. Uh, so we're open to working with all of these with these governments, but we're not going to be intimidated by any of them either. And some governments are hostile, some are supportive, but we'll just focus on what we do and what we do well, and that's effectively intervening against poaching operations.
Yeah, no, I think that's really important, especially for those remote areas where you have. So how many ships do you have in total right now on the ocean?
11 ships now. We just acquired the Sea Eagle this week.
Oh, congratulations. What length is it? What sort of ship?
The Sea Eagle, it's about 45 meters, I think, on that.
Right.
And it's going to be dedicated to exclusive to the Mediterranean, to work there along with the Conrad. We'll have two ships in the Mediterranean. We have vessels in the Eastern Tropical Pacific and Western Mexico and off East and West Africa and in the Baltic Sea.
Right. Under which flag are these ships? Are they all under the same flag? Flag
Most of
state?
them most of them under the Dutch flag.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. So, well, that's where the Sea Shepherd Global is based. So that's where
Well,
they're.
the Dutch registry is one of the best, and the reason being is that the Dutch registry of shipping is not under the control of the Dutch government, so it can't be influenced by that. It goes way back to the Dutch East Indian Company, so it's independent of the government, and so we find that there's a lot less political pressure that's put on the Dutch registry than on other registries. For instance, we had a Belize flag once for 18 days until Japan stepped on Belize and ordered them to take it away from us. We lost a lot of flags because of Japanese pressure, but they weren't able to take the Dutch flag.
Very interesting. Great. And so yeah, I think we're just reaching to the end of our talk here. I think for me the important thing is that came out of this is really working together, and it seems to me that Sea Shepherd over the years is becoming more mainstream. Would you confirm that?
No, we're not becoming mainstream. I think mainstream is becoming more us, really. We haven't
Yeah.
changed, but I think that there's more of people are becoming more aware of just how dire the situation is in the ocean, and are coming around to seeing that our approach is not as radical as he used to think it was. That I've always considered ourselves to be very conservative. I mean, you don't get more conservative than being a conservation organization. That is the root of the word conservative. But the language has been distorted quite a bit over the years. So conservative, the people who call themselves conservatives today, I refer to as the radicals. They're out there destroying our ocean and destroying our forests and causing a lot of problems.
So I suppose the big enemy here, if there's an enemy, or like the disease, is capitalism and production of stuff, whether it's stuff that we make or stuff that we acquire from nature, that we steal from nature. So I think that's ultimately quite a big battle that needs to be fought on all fronts. And so you're on the oceans with your ships, but I suppose a lot of it can be fought in those big assemblies and meetings, and trying to really diminish that pursuit of growth and eternal growth. And do you have any final thoughts on that, on how we must change our model?
Well, our political economic systems are somewhat archaic, and we do need to develop a new way of looking at ourselves in relation to nature. We can learn from indigenous cultures. We're predominantly anthropocentric in orientation right now, and other words, it's all about us. We're dominant over everything. We can do whatever we want. I think we have to return to a biocentric perspective where we understand that we're part of everything and we have to live in harmony with all other species, that these species are absolutely essential. Diversity is absolutely essential for our very survival. And if we don't learn to live in harmony with all of those other species, we as a species will go extinct. It's as simple as that. Three basic laws of ecology: the law of diversity, the strength of an ecosystem is dependent upon diversity; the law of interdependence, that the species within that ecosystem are interdependent with each other; and the law of finite resources, that there's a limit to growth, a limit to carrying capacity, and when we steal the carrying capacity of other species, that contributes to more diminishment of interdependence and diversity. So if we don't learn to adapt, then we're simply not going to survive.
Yeah, I think here in New Zealand, in Aotearoa, there's a growing resurgence of indigenous knowledge and Maoridom, and we have Te Ao Maori, the Maori way of viewing the world, and Kaitiakitanga, which is described in different ways and definitions, but ultimately it's about being a Kaitiaki, which means guardian, essentially stewarding the natural resources, and so placing the human inside the environmental space and not being separate from it. So, in that sense, they're not very fond of the Western view of closing off areas permanently. I think it's about being in that space and having a relationship with the ecosystem. So it doesn't mean don't take, but it could mean don't take for a certain amount of time based on a lunar calendar or something, until you can then have a replenished food basket, because that's how they saw it. That you can then help yourself to some food. So they're not against helping yourself every once in a while, but as long as it replenishes itself based on that understanding of how things work. So I think we should maybe go back to that. But how do you do that on a global scale with 9 billion people?
Well, we've been given three flags that we're proud to fly: the Maori flag, the Aboriginal flag, and the flag of the Five Nations of the Iroquois Confederacy. And what we can learn from indigenous cultures is this: for thousands of years, Polynesia had a thing called kapu, that they would declare a bay, say in Bora Bora, Hawaii, whatever, as a kapu, and that anybody caught fishing in that bay for say 20 years would be severely punished, usually the death penalty. And when people say, well, that's a little extreme, isn't it, for catching a fish? I said, well, no, not from their point of view, because they understood that if the fish disappeared, the people would die. So that it was absolutely essential for their survival. The problem today is there are no kapu areas. There's no place for the fish to hide. We need to give the ocean the opportunity to repair the damage that we've done to it. We need to leave it alone for a while. Artisanal fishing, indigenous fishing is relatively minor with its impact on ecosystems. It's less than say 2% compared to the huge corporate trawlers and draggers and industrialized operations. That's what has to be shut down. And nobody's saying that an artisanal fisher person cannot catch a fish. What we're saying is get rid of the super trawlers, get rid of those huge nets and drag. And if we don't, then it's all going to collapse. It simply is not sustainable. There is no sustainable commercial fishery anywhere on this planet right now. There just isn't. No matter what they say and how many scientists who work for the industry they pull out and say it is, it simply is not true. I was raised in an Eastern Canadian fishing village. I have seen with my own eyes the diminishment of all of those species in that ecosystem. And it is collapsed, and it is continuing to collapse. The cod fishery totally collapsed. Orange roughy off New Zealand totally collapsed. And I don't see anything recovering.
So, like, if the whole world stopped fishing now, commercial fishing at the industrial scale that you're referring to, how long do you think the oceans would get back to normal, as in normal before like human industrial civilization normal? How long?
I'd like to give it 50 years, but here's a good example. World War I and World War II, during those brief periods of time, because the fishing boats weren't out there, there was a revival in fish populations. They were recovering within 5-6 years. And it doesn't take long. The oceans are very resilient. They can survive. We just have to give it time. We have to, allow them that. I mean, in 1900, the average codfish that was caught off the North Atlantic was about a meter to a meter and a half. now 18 inches. If you're lucky, if you can get that. You don't see, I mean, these are long living animals. Halibut can live to 200 years of age. Orange roughy, they don't even become sexually mature until they're 45 and live to be 200. They can't compete with, or they can't keep up with our demand. And unfortunately, we had this thing also called the economics of extinction. That is, scarcity translates into profit. So as the numbers become diminished, they go out and catch even more because they're going to make even more money because there's less and less. And so you got the absurd situation where one tuna fish can sell for $1 million in Japan. On that, it's been reduced by 90% of its population, and because of that reduction, that scarcity is translated into very, very high prices.
Yeah, and I think that's really one of the big problems of the capitalism model, is that it has its extreme situations like that where it's just absurd. It becomes absurd. And just perhaps one thing on climate change. I think climate change, we sort of overlooked that a little bit, but the impacts of climate change on the oceans are not talked a lot about actually in Seaspiracy. Acidification, loss of oxygen, warming, driving fish populations polewards. We're seeing warming waters in the tropics. If we reach that tipping point of 1.5 degree increase, 2 degrees, we're going to lose 99% of our corals. IPCC fact. What are your thoughts on how we're mitigating that and climate change?
I don't see climate change having an effect on the ocean. I see the ocean having an effect on climate change. It's the ocean that regulates climate. It regulates temperature, the currents, the winds. All of this is regulated by the ocean. The ocean is the life support system of the planet. And I like to explain it this way, especially to young people, that if you look at the Earth as a spaceship, which is what it is, we're on this incredible voyage around the Milky Way, and every spaceship has this life support system that regulates our temperature and provides the food and provides oxygen. And that life support system is run by a crew. It's maintained by a crew of species, not us. We humans, we're passengers. We're having a wonderful time amusing ourselves, but we're not crew members. But what we are doing is we're murdering crew members. We're killing them. And there's only so many you can kill before the machinery begins to fall apart. I mean, since 1950, there's been a 40% diminishment in phytoplankton populations in the seas. 40%. And that's a scientific fact. And phytoplankton provides up to 70% of the oxygen in the air we breathe. If phytoplankton disappears tomorrow, we die. We don't live on this planet without phytoplankton. It's a basis for life. And we don't even give it any thought. Now they're even talking about mass harvesting of zooplankton to provide cheap protein paste for domestic animals and things. I mean, it's a world out of balance. We live in a world where chickens are now eating more fish than all the puffins and albatrosses in the ocean. We live in a world where domestic house cats are eating more fish than all the seals in the North Atlantic Ocean. It's just completely out of balance, and it has to stop. The bycatch in this commercial fishing operations are horrendous, with 22 kilos of living things destroyed for every kilo of shrimp pulled from the sea. It's got to end. It's not sustainable. This word sustainable, it's just used by everybody. It's just business as usual, really. But to pull an Antarctic toothfish off the coast of Antarctica in the Southern Ocean and then fly it to Paris and New York and sell it as Chilean sea bass is insane. We shouldn't be engaging in that kind of trade. That's all marketing stuff. The Chilean sea bass is not from Chile. It's not even a bass, but nobody's going to buy toothfish. It doesn't sound good. So, they just change the name and move it around. Like spider crabs. Nobody ate spider crabs until they changed the name to Alaska king crab.
Marketing. Yeah. So like in terms of the final words of this exchange, like, do you feel that we need to shock people or inspire them or have a little bit of both going on to get things moving?
I think we have to keep telling stories similar to what Ali and Lucy did with Seaspiracy, like the octopus teacher, like Sharkwater, like so many of these. We have to continue to tell these stories. People don't read books anymore, really, but we do have film, and we have television, and we have the internet, and so we can use that as best we can. But it's the stories that change. Stories have changed things throughout the entire history of humankind, whether it's the Bible or the Quran or literature, whatever. This is what people relate to. So we just have to write that story and get people to listen to it.
Yeah, I mean, what I'm most fond of is stories that tell the story of science and understanding of our world. And so I'm a science communicator. And so the way I look at it is there are so many people outside in the world doing great work, inspiring leaders, young people, older people. And I think that's really those stories that should come out to inspire others so they can follow in their footsteps. And so that's really sort of the work that I'm doing now. And but I think you're right. I think there needs to be an awareness as well of how bad it is, and so that's what films like Seaspiracy do, is they give a quick summary of what's going on around the world, and maybe it's inaccurate, maybe it's not complete, but at least it's been attempted. So what's next for you? What's coming up for you in the next few months? Do you have anything coming up that's worthy of talking about, just as a final?
We're working on films. I'm doing a lot of writing and everything, and also coordinating the movement of the ships around the world. So there's a lot of projects, a lot of campaigns, and so one of the things I learned a long time ago is we don't really think too much of the future. We don't focus on the future. We focus on the present, and what we do every day in the present will define what the future will be. And so that's what I spend my time doing, as much as I can every day to advance this story and to advance our campaigns.
That's very yes, it's what you said at the beginning of our exchange, and it's very wise, and certainly I'm doing that right now. The tagline for Blue Cradle is "The ocean is in our hands," so we're trying to cultivate that by educating school children, going in schools and explaining a lot of things around how we have an impact. Everything we do on an everyday basis has an effect on the ocean, and vice versa. The ocean has an effect on us. That's ocean
Well,
literacy. It's been coined as a framework. So
you could
yeah,
also you could also look on it that we are in the hands of the ocean. The ocean will determine what our fate will be.
it's very true as well. And we are made of the ocean. If you think of how 70% of our bodies is water. Think of the
It's even more so than that. I always think, I don't even know why we call it the planet Earth. It's actually the planet ocean. And what is the ocean? People tend to see in their mind's eye the sea, but it isn't that. The ocean is water. It's water in continuous circulation, sometimes in the sea, sometimes in ice, sometimes in the clouds, sometimes underground, and sometimes in the cells of every living plant and animal. So the ocean flows through us all the time. The water in your body right now is once in ice, once underground, once in the clouds. And everything is completely connected. This one molecule, it's like water is like one molecule. It's connected. Everything on this planet is connected through it. And each part affects the other. So we don't want to disrupt that circulatory system, or else things die.
Yeah, I think at one point I suggested to some of my colleagues that we should rename Earth Ocean. And I think there's a few of us out there that believe that. I don't see why we shouldn't launch a campaign. I'm not sure where we would have to begin to get it universally accepted that we change the name of the planet.
Well, we're a bunch of land lovers, so I don't know if that'll happen. But if you look at the history, there's always been an ocean. There's never the continents always haven't been there, or at least not in their present shape. They're constantly moving around, but the ocean has always been there as far as long as life has been here.
Radio. Well, it's been really nice talking to you, Paul, and thank you so much for your time. We'll now end the recording, and you can watch the next episode on our YouTube channel. There's going to be more of these, so stay tuned. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you. Thanks.